Well, good evening.
Si riscontrano pochi, rari testi
We have just a few texts in ancient Christianity texts speaking about elderly.
diremmo che bisogna
We would say
così arrampicarsi sugli
that it's
specchi
about
proprio per
climbing on mirrors to find texts and documents
leggere una
where
riflessione
we can
sistematica
read
sui
about a
trattati sistematici
systematic reading and
per
work
quanto
on
riguarda
piece of literature on
l'ortodossia
elderly as for Christian authors.
La ragione è evidente e può, diremmo così, dividersi in due
And the
indicazioni.
reason for that has
La prima, la
two
ragione
channels.
etica,
The first, the single
ha intrapreso due strade
reason, which has two
che si
separate
sono poi
channels,
separate.
which then
Una è
separated.
che l'interesse
One is
dei
that the
primi secoli,
interest of the
è
early
spiegare
centuries
il
is to
dato
explain the
dell'Evangelo.
data of the gospel.
La maggior parte degli
The
scritti
majority
degli autori cristiani antichi
of the writings
riguardano,
by ancient Christian
noi diciamo
authors
con parole nostre di
are
oggi,
about
evangelizzare,
evangelizing, so the
rendere il
evangelization,
messaggio del
which is
Vangelo
making the message
adatto,
enshrined in the gospel suitable
agevole e a portata di
and
mano di coloro
accessible
che sono stati
for
affidati come
those who were
pastori. La maggior parte sono pastori
given
e
the
quindi
task
la
of
maggior parte degli
shepherd.
scritti sono pastorali. Dall'altra parte dovevano far fronte a
But
tanti
they also had to
problemi e
deal with many
tanti
problems
interroganti. Non
and
so
many
se avete
open
fatto mai il
issues.
caso
I don't know if you
che
have
nessuna
noticed that
religione
no
ha avuto
religion
mai
has ever had
inaugurato,
what
diciamo, il cristianesimo, e
inaugurated
cioè
Christianism, which
dall'inizio è
is,
stata
since its
sempre
inception, it has always
accompagnato il
been
dato
so that
evangelico con una riflessione
the data has always been
teologica.
accompanied
E
by
oggi
a
se si
theological
parla di
reflection.
studiare
So
teologia
when
si
it's
parla
about
sempre
studying
di
theology,
teologia
it's always
cristiana.
about Christian theology.
Può essere teologia cattolica,
Might be
luterana,
Catholic,
ma sempre
Lutheran,
è teologia cristiana.
but it's still Christian
E
theology.
ciò posto,
That being said,
questi pochi testi
these
si posso
few
dire che si rifanno
pieces of
sempre alla
literature
tradizione classica.
refer back to
Per
the classical
esempio,
tradition.
il trattatello, il trattato, se
For
vogliamo,
instance,
Tertulliano
the
di Rena,
treaty,
il trattato De Pazienza di Tertulliano, che diciamo,
so the Pazienza di Tertulliano,
è stato ispirato, non copiato, ma quasi,
the Tertullian
dalla omologa
Patience,
opera
which
di
was copied
Seneca.
by the,
E, bisogna
the
aspettare il
Seneca's
V
work.
secolo per leggere un trattato
Not
di
until the 5th century
antropologia, che è anche una
came,
parola nostra assai nuova,
we could read a new
esiste
text.
un vescovo,
A
Nemesio di
bishop
Emesa, ha scritto
wrote
De Natura Hominis,
De Natura Hominis,
in cui riflette sulla parte
where he reflects
immateriale, cioè
on the
ciò che
intangible
è
part,
l'ultimo
namely
Adamo, e la parte
what each one of us has
esteriore, il corpo.
within.
Al di là di questi non c'è niente, quindi mi devo rifare a due giganti, ai due più
So I have to refer
grandi
back
scrittori della letteratura
to
cristiana antica,
some of the
un
most
greco e un
important
latino,
authors, one a Greek, one a
e
Latin one,
cioè Origene e
Origen
Augustine.
and Augustine.
Volevo dire anche che avevo messo Nemesio perché Nemesio
Also Nemesio,
nelle prime
Nemesius,
battute, nei primi paragrafi De Diffusius Anthropu, De Natura Hominis,
as in De Natura Hominis,
parla
in the
di
preliminary
un
paragraphs, he
che
speaks about
l'essere umano
the
è
fact
una
that the human being
creazione
is is a
meravigliosa.
beautiful
Forse il
creation.
Santo Padre aveva letto
I don't
questo
know if the Holy Father has read
il titolo
these
alla
parts.
lettera, e parlare di ciò che parla la lettera, che ha presentato pochi giorni fa. Ma è interessante che già un vescovo del V secolo parlava di questo, della possibilità.
But as early as the 5th century, we saw some testimonies.
Di Dio,
So
della
the creation of
meravigliosa
God and the
creazione
beautiful
di Dio degli
creation
esseri
of God.
umani. Quindi non c'è
Nothing in the Christian world resembles the Cicerone's work, although we keep thinking under the same senectudis rationale. So Cicerone explicitly stated the parts where the old age is considered as negative. The abandonment of the work sphere, physical weakness, deprivation of any pleasure in life, proximity to death. But Cicero goes beyond that, that he was a genius. And he also points out the positive traits of old age, the auctoritas, concilium, sententia, which were the virtues praised by the members of the Roman Curia, I mean the Roman Empire. But as I said, this word is still used. We can still identify ourselves in these Ciceronian characteristics. Some texts remain. But let's consider one that I particularly appreciate, Clement of Alexandria. So Clement was eclectic, but it was quite neutral. There were a huge collection of text. Stromata, I don't know if you know them. He proposes negative considerations on the old man. It is imperative to re-educate elderly as they act as if they were infants. He's quoting Plato. As Plato used to say, the elderly could regress up to the point of becoming infant again. Is something that is echoed in something that resonates in the etymology of the Italian term rimbambire, which is to become childish. Other authors have instead emphasized the path of auctoritas, such as Clement of Rome. Where he speaks about episodes of youth rebellion against the elders. And we have so many political problems in these texts, so many political implications, and thank God we are not going to delve into them today. So let's leave aside Clement, Ignatius, Irenaeus, as they speak about oi presbyteroi, so the elders, connecting them to the prestige of auctoritas, understood as the veneration, a veneration tributed by the ancient church to the 70 translators of the Bible. If you've never read Origen, there isn't much left of it, but it is still worth reading. The Alexandrian master no longer dwells on the auctoritas of the elders, as it had already been consolidated. Everything had been accepted. The fact, I'm referring to the consolidation of apostolic succession. So there was no matter, no materia condentere, and so he basically doesn't speak about it. he speaks very little about the authorities. Has he suffered a lot due to the authorities who condemned him?
dall'inizio, no? Da giovane, l'aveva
Since when he was young, the bishop
che quello che comandava era lui.
made him understand that he was in charge.
Quindi, per l'Alessandrino, la giustizia che viene dal Logos, cioè da Gesù Cristo incarnato,
So Alexander is aware that it is the righteousness deriving from the Logos that makes one truly an elder,
rende,
not old age that makes one righteous.
puoi essere un
It means that
presbitero
you can be,
anche se non sei anziano. Cioè, puoi essere
means
maturo
that you
nello
can be mature in
spirito
your spirit
anche se non hai
if
raggiunto l'età per essere chiamato anziano. E questo
you are not in the
tutti
age
i vescovi lo
bracket
sapete.
to be called. You don't have the age bracket to be called
Intervento
old.
sulla Bibbia, no? Lo sapete, Daniele è l'esempio classico. In questo contesto presbiteros non indica
So
più
this context, presbyter, no longer indicates the elderly as it defines the ecclesiastic condition of a priest.
questo lo dice nelle omelie
And this is
al
clearly
profeta
stated
Geremia 12:13.
in his homilies on Jeremiah,
Serviranno a nulla.
saying that their functions will be of no use. And he explains that the word of God benefits both the people and the presbyter.
Il servizio sacerdotale
But
non
priestly service does not automatically guarantee salvation,
perché è evidente che
because it
mentre
is evident that many
si perdono,
presbyters will be lost,
molti fedeli.
while many of the faithful will be declared blessed.
Questo lo dice Origen. Se lei è d'accordo? Ciò che conta non è
What matters is not sitting in a presbytery, yet living worthily according to the demands of the Logos,
per chi detiene
especially for those who hold ecclesiastical governance.
di Origen. Gli esempi sono numerosi.
Examples are many and confirm that Origen recognizes the honor due to bishops, priests, and diacons,
Dalla loro.
regardless of their physical age.
Se andiamo a un commento di qualche anno posteriore,
If we look at a commentary
44,
244,
commento a Matteo,
it's in his commentary on Matthew,
il tono cambia.
the tone changes.
E lui, mentre commenta
And
Matteo 15,
as he comments
quando l'Evangelista riporta
this
la
passage,
controversia dei farisei,
when the evangelist reports the controversy with the Pharisees who accused the disciples of transgressing the tradition of the elders by not washing their hands. And the Alexandrian exhorts the faithful to purify their actions not according to the tradition of the elders,
vale a dire,
that is to say, human traditions,
seguendo la retta
but by following the right reason to approach the three loaves, the bread of listening, the bread of Eucharist, and the bread of ecclesial life.
Gesù rimprovera i farisei anteponendo
Jesus reprimands the Pharisees by placing divine commandments before the rules of man.
Origine allunga e allarga il testo
So basically, Origen expands Matthew's
più di Matteo,
quotation
cioè doveva essere più lungo l'argomento. E i testi in cui
by recalling
di Esodo e Levitico
Exodus and Leviticus on the duty to honor parents
ha delle conseguenze
and the consequences for
positive
those
e le conseguenze negative.
who curse them,
No? E anche di coloro che maledicono i propri genitori. E questo in cui vi dicevo che cambiava il tono.
This is why, as we said, the tone changed.
Lui, in questi pochi testi che ci sono,
In these few texts, he speaks about
come
the elderly
venire incontro a queste persone che
as
hanno
to
raggiunto una certa età.
support these people. Honoring one's father and mother consists, according to the Savior,
Nel provvedere con
in concretely providing for their vital needs, offering food, clothing, and any necessary assistance.
Origine ebbe
Origen had human experiences of suffering, a renunciation,
cominciare dal padre che è stato martire, si dovette prendere cura della
and he had
famiglia.
to take care of his family. He was the oldest in his family. When he was 17, he started
Mettere su
working
è diventato
to build a family,
sostegno della
and he became the main support of his family as his father passed away.
trattato di più o meno 10
In a
anni prima, molto bello,
treaty,
è un commento al Padre Nostro.
we find this comment to the Padre Nostro.
La preghiera è stato tradotto anche in
The
italiano,
De Orazione has also been translated in Italian.
bello, molto breve. Egli affronta il tema
And he deals with the theme of fragility in the 11th chapter,
dell'unione tra creatura
dealing with the union between human rational creature and spiritual ones.
che gli
And he states that angels and the souls of the deceased pray together with living Christians.
sotto l'antropologia origeniana che è molto complessa, in cui
And here we have the
vengono presi tutti
anthropology, where
di essere creati sono
all human beings are considered as rational human beings. Some of them with a body, some of them had no body, like angels.
di impostazione platonica, ma è questo per lui è unita, che poi riprenderà la tradizione della Chiesa, è unita la preghiera di coloro
So there is
che
a
peregrinano
combination
in
of
questo
the
mondo, la preghiera di coloro che sono
so the
passati
prayers of those who passed away
di sempre là.
and those who have always been on the other side, so angels.
Esempi,
And there are three examples: Tobit and Sarah,
la preghiera di Tobia e Sara che viene
the
presentata
prayer of Tobit and Sarah being presented before God by Raphael,
gioia degli angeli
the joy of the angels over the conversion of a single sinner in the Gospel of Luke, and the intercession of Jeremiah, who was already dead, for the people and for the entire holy city.
no? Giuda Maccabeo fa un sogno in
It
cui
was a dream by Judah
vede il profeta Geremia,
where he sees the prophet Jeremiah. I'm not dwelling on
consegna una spada e poi con quella
the dream, but he gives us word, and with this word, he's meant to kill someone. But I mean, someone means enemies.
mandato
That was the mandate that he had as a
in questo
prophet.
contesto Origene osserva
In this
che i
context,
cristiani
Origen observes that deceased Christians love their brothers who are still fighting, that is, us,
siamo noi i più
and we are the weakest and the most in need of care, more than the living can manage to do.
cioè coloro che non sono nel corpo possono pregare meglio di noi.
Well, because those who are no longer subject to materiality possess a superior capacity to love compared to those who are still submissive to human weakness.
Coloro che non sono più soggetti alla materialità
It's materiality,
possiedono una capacità
the
di amare
concept.
superiore rispetto a chi è ancora sottomesso alla debolezza
It's about
umana.
being submissive to human weakness. Origen separates two types of fragility: the universal one,
Gli esseri biologici
inherent in the biological world,
Seneia,
Seneia, that's the name,
fedeli
and that of
cristiani
the
attrezzati podeisis.
Christian one.
Significativamente nel greco classico
In classical Greek, Seneia indicated the weakness of old age.
Geros, no? La debolezza dell'anziano. Il termine Seneia, che significa in genere
This term means weakness, fragility, lack of vigor, describes the human being deprived of the fullness of the strength of their personality,
e si applica a situazioni biologiche
applying to the biological situations such as age and gender,
che comportano
which entail intrinsic fragility, so the weaker gender and old age. So without
veridicità.
entering into the merit of the truthfulness of this assumption, as this is not our task,
Notiamo
but
però
we still note that
Seneia,
for Origen, the Seia
fragilità
indicates the fragility of a biological life
a finire.
destined to end, bound to
Poi il
end.
discorso,
And then he makes use of a Pauline passage on solidarity within the members of the suffering body. If one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. And if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. It's a principle of solidarity applies not only to the living, but also to love of those who already are in the afterlife, as he had previously stated. Origen concludes this section of the De Ratione by recalling the weakness of Paul and his brothers in the Lord by paraphrasing Matthew on works of charity. Christ declares himself present in every suffering person. He is sick in each of the sick, imprisoned, naked, stranger, hungry and thirsty, for the tribulation of the believers are the very sufferings of Christ. When these ancient writers speak about this fragility, they always speak about the gospel. To conclude, according to Origen, the true elder is the one who holds maturity of heart, not one who is advanced in years. So the spiritual adulthood, this concept emerges in the third homily on Genesis. This homily is dedicated to the relationship between God and Abraham and the meaning of circumcision. Commenting on Genesis 18, which states that Abraham and Sarah were both presbyteroi, both Abraham and Sarah. They were elder and in so-called advanced in age. And this leads to a distinction between elder and being in advanced age. Many patriarchs lived much longer than Abraham, reaching centenarian ages before the flood. Adam lived 930 years, his son Seth 912, Enoch 800, Lamech 777. Nonetheless, none of them received the title of presbytero, so elder, because in Abraham this term does not indicate physical old age, but spiritual perfection, that is the maturity of heart. He was an elder even though he had not reached even 2 centuries of life. Augustine. So I felt compelled to speak about St. Augustine, saying that he was first in class. There were many others, but today we will speak about Augustine. Although for Augustine fragility is often linked to sin, so the explanation of the existence of evil, but sometimes it deals with man's bodily vulnerability. In Sermo 31, he juxtaposes Psalm 125, Qui seminant in lacrimis, with the world joy of the Apostle Paul. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, and I have kept the faith. I think you know it by heart. So, and Augustine addresses these words to the weak, not to force them to rejoice in pain, but to offer a reason for hope. Even when sowing in tears, there is the certainty that suffering and anguish will cease to exist, leaving room for endless joy. And in this case, too, we see the eschatological trait of the bishop of Augustine, who was concerned with instilling hope deep within the hearts of the faithful, especially in sermons dedicated to the martyrs, among whom the first is Christ. In another sermon, it's delivered at Christmas, Augustine notes that Emmanuel came in the weakness of the flesh, not in the iniquity of the human heart. The Holy Bishop, following the letter to the Hebrews, emphasizes that Christ can sympathize our infirmities, having been tested in every way except for sin. Augustine offers a dense Christological synthesis in this sermon. Christ approaches through the assumed humanity and frees us through his divinity. Mortal fragility was the vehicle through which immortal truth, which is Christ, granted us salvation manifesting itself within our humble limits. In other words, it is in weakness and human fragility that the daily salvation God offers us is manifested, and this happens through these humble human tools of ours. And this is the deepest sense of the idea of this Congress for Christian ancient literature. So this bridge is right there. And through this fragility, we can unveil a piece of paradise, and the other way around as well, showing the weakest one that a paradise and a heaven exist, a life that is different. Not life doesn't always mean suffering. In another text, he deals with the care that the faithful must have for the weakest member of the body of Christ. Once again, with the clear use of a Pauline image. To love Christ, love must embrace the whole world, since his members are spread everywhere. Loving only the head, while disregarding the body, means being divided and no longer being united to the church or submissive to Christ. If you love Christ, who is the head, and blaspheme against the members of his body, your love is worth nothing. Augustine resorts to an effective comparison, saying that it is like kissing someone's head while violently trampling on their feet. The pain caused to the weak limbs would far outweigh the joy of the embrace and the kisses received on the head. Trampling on their feet means not supporting the weakest ones, and kissing someone's head means praising God by the spoken word. He was a shepherd, so loving God only through the spoken word, and then kissing someone's head and adoring God, failing to help the needy and the weakest is trampling on the feet. All of these means causing the Lord intense pain instead of immense joy. In another Augustine's most famous sermons, or from the Augustinian tradition, he invites, it was an episcopal ordination, and exhorts He invites them to welcome both external collaborators who plant one water and their inner action of God who causes growth. And he says that the pastor must correct the undisciplined, comfort and the faint-hearted, and support the weak. Aware of the burden of this task, he constantly invokes divine help, remembering that there is more pleasure in being useful than in presiding. From Augustine's letters, we take three significant passages. In letter 21, Augustine begs the elderly Valerius to grant him time for the study of the sacred scriptures. But he needed more time to study the sacred scriptures. And despite Augustine's stature, everybody knew him. His humility is striking as he asks for mercy from his predecessors to deepen his knowledge of the sacred page. It is difficult to recognize the wisdom of the elderly. But he recognizes this wisdom deriving from the decade-long experience of the elderly bishop, offering an example of humility to be treasured. In letter 29 to Alypius, Augustine recounts when, while still a priest, he was urged by Valerius to preach under difficult circumstances against the disorders of the Donatists. And Augustine was still a priest, and he said, "Your turn. If you get beaten up, it's none of your business." On that occasion, he used metaphors regarding the contrast between light and shadow, white and black, to recall the beauty of order. This letter has been extensively studied, and it is imperative to highlight the exercise of obedience and charity that Augustine demonstrated toward the elderly bishop. It's difficult to obey, especially in churches.
Concludiamo l'analisi di queste lettere.
We conclude the analysis of these letters with a quotation from the playwright Terence, and this is one of the most famous quotes by Augustine. Augustine quoted it in the letter 155, and this is why it became, this sentence became extremely famous. The enemy of oneself. So imagine a dialogue between two old men in which one states, "Your business perhaps leave you so much free time that you also deal with the business of others which do not concern you at all," while the other replies, "I'm a man, and I think no human is alien to me." This is one of the most famous sentences by Augustine. Is letter 155. Augustine says that the participants felt part of this discourse. This concept also resonates constantly in his subsequent writings. And at the end of this reflection, we find a text from De Vera Religione where Augustine separates earth, the life on earth, and heaven. In paragraphs 48 and 49. He had this idea of, 6,000 years as the average duration of the world. In paragraph 48, he describes life in this world and the age of life. It follows the tradition,
Comunque, ogni essere vivente dice
So every human being says that Augustine lives in this destiny of biological life. It's not important what you do, no matter what one does or will do, but what one possesses or what one does not have. Human beings are all mortal and will all die without exception.
meraviglioso, no? Paragrafo
Beautiful.
48 descrive queste
Paragraph
tappe
48
di cui,
describes
vabbè, la
the
prima età,
stages of biological life: infancy, childhood, adolescence, youth,
e l'anzianità.
and mature age.
È l'età peggiore
And old age is the worst age bracket.
malattie, conduce
Weak and subject to diseases, which inevitably leads to death.
sta parlando di questa.
Sì.
Questo è l'uomo vecchio, è l'uomo
This is the
esteriore,
old
l'uomo
man,
terreno
the
che
outer
vive
man,
secondo desideri
or the
temporali,
earthly man who lives according to temporal desires, who cannot achieve either true happiness or true peace in this life. Conversely, paragraph 49 speaks of an inner rebirth,
per mezzo della forza spirituale, la sapienza che viene dall'alto,
which by means of spiritual strength and wisdom that comes from above, destroys and kills the old man and subjects him to heavenly laws.
processo vitale che si
It's a vital process that is fulfilled only after death,
nuovo, l'uomo
defining the new man or the inner man through his spiritual ages.
questa età spirituale
The sixth age, spiritual old age, is the total transformation into the eternal, the total forgetting of temporal life, the age in which one moves from imperfection to the perfect form, which is the image and likeness of God. The seventh is eternal peace,
no, l'abbraccio eterno, gioia senza fine,
endless joy.
la vita eterna, no? L'uomo nuovo. Questo stacco
The new man. This sharp, precise, impassable, and terrible break between the earthly world and the world of the afterlife does not exempt the Christian from daily commitment.
molto spesso nei
He refers in the last four treatises,
li ha scritti qualche anno prima di morire, agli anni prima di morire. Per esempio nel
for instance, in the Dolo Perseveranzi.
tra i beni che Dio ci
Among the goods that God gives us remains the gift of the perseverance until the end, which would be requested from God every day in vain if God himself, lending his ear to the one who prays, did not bring it about in him through his grace. Even if everything will be resolved in the future, we are called by grace to persevere in doing good and to help the most fragile, to make them feel, as early as in this mortal life, the closeness of God and the closeness with God. Thank you.